John Phillips, attorney for the family. It's been a long 2 years. I obviously don't have much to say except for one thing, and that's I had a baby last night. And I looked at him, and I had made a promise to Ron that he would not be born in a world where there's no justice. These are the greatest parents. They're still parenting Jordan Davis, and it is my pleasure to represent them and introduce Lucia McBath and Ron Davis.
Words cannot express our joy, but also our great sorrow. Because with the verdicts of all counts being guilty for Michael Dunn, we know that Jordan has received his justice. We know that Jordan's life and legacy will live on for others, but at the same time, we're very saddened by the life that Michael Dunn will continue to live. We are saddened for his family and for his friends and the community that will continue to suffer by his actions. But we are very grateful that justice has been served. Justice not only for Jordan, but justice for Trayvon. And justice for all the nameless faces and children and people that will never have a voice. And Ron and I are committed to giving our lives to walking out Jordan's justice and Jordan's legacy. We're so grateful to the Jacksonville community that has continued to stand by us and support us these last 2 years. We could have not done this without your prayers and your support. And for those of you that we may never know, we may never see, thank you for uplifting us in praying for justice for Jordan.
I am so thankful at this moment. The Lord has given me peace throughout this whole retrial. And as I get on my knees at night, I would always pray just for peace, not the outcome, but just for peace, whatever the outcome would be. I wanted Jacksonville to be a shining example that you could have a jury made up of mostly white people, white men, and be an example to the rest of the world to stop the discriminatory practices, stop discriminating, stop looking where we have to look at juries and say what the makeup of juries are. All across this nation, every time there's a trial between a victim that is black and someone that shot him that is white, the first thing we look at is what is the makeup of the jury. Is that black victim going to be represented? And hopefully this is a start where we don't have to look at the makeup of the jury anymore. All we can do is put on a case and look at the minds and the souls and the hearts of people, of human beings, not of skin color, but of human beings. We don't have to look at it if it's the sheriff's department, because I was telling my wife not long ago, it's not because someone is law enforcement or police, it's who wears the uniform. It's a job. Just like you have a job, no matter what you do, you have good doctors and bad doctors. You have good teachers and bad teachers. You have good police and bad police. So if we're going to have protests against the uniform, make sure it's the person that's in the uniform. If people in Ferguson did wrong, then let's protest against the bad cops in Ferguson. I'm sure there's some good cops that are being hurt by this whole experience. I want to give my heart and my prayers to all the mothers and fathers out there that have lost children, that got no justice. And they hang their heads every day and they speak about their child and they wear buttons and they wear wristbands. and they wear pictures of their lost loved ones. And they cry because no one listens to them. And I get emails, and I read each and every one of them. I get text messages, I read each and every one of them. I don't have secretaries. I read each and every one of them. They cry out, say, Mr. Davis, just want to tell you about my son. Just want to tell you about my daughter. They found her in a ditch, you know. The Lynette Roebucks of the world, you know, the Oscar Grants of the world, where Uncle Bobby has to go and struggle and try to make people understand how much he loved his child. And I just want to say, we must in America do a better job of loving each other. We don't do a good enough job. The world looks at us and they look up to us. Everybody tries to come over to America. Everybody tries to get a visa to come to America. And I was so disappointed over the last few years how we're acting in America. And I just wanted to say, since I have the time to say it, I'm glad today that we can see something positive in America, that we can report on the news something positive tonight. Tomorrow morning we can talk about maybe this is a start here in Florida, and maybe it'll go around the world, that let's do the right thing. Let's make sure that the decision that we make in a courtroom is based on witness testimony and the facts of the case, and not of biases that we may have for one another. I just thank you all for supporting us in Jacksonville. You have all in the media have supported our family. JSO, that the police department has supported our family continuously, and people from around this great country have supported Ron Davis, Jordan Davis, Lucy McBath. They have supported us from day one. And I hope you support the other families that need your support, you know. And lastly, I just want to thank Sabrina Fulton for coming on the first day. She has been like a sister to me. I want to thank for the Circle of Fathers, for Trayvon Martin's foundation, for gathering the fathers together, teaching us that even if we're disappointed in the court decisions, that we don't go out and we don't riot. We don't go out and tear other people's property up. What we do is stand as soldiers, stand as great men, and be a shining light to let people know that we can handle adversity, and there's different ways to handle it without making an embarrassment of yourself. And I stand here as a soldier for Jordan. Thank you.
No questions. Thank you.
No, I think it's off. Take your time. Just come here. Well, good evening, and it is much more of a pleasure to be here today than for the reason I had to come before you yesterday. We want to start by thanking the jury for their hard work and their deliberations, and of course we feel that we achieved justice for our victims in this case. And I also want to thank the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. We worked so closely with them on all of these cases, and through both trials they endured an attack on their abilities, which was quite frankly ridiculous. We have the best Sheriff's Office. They do an amazing job on homicides, on working those homicides, on their clearance rate. So with us, of course, you all probably recognize Sergeant Michael Paul, Lead Detective Mark Musser, Travis Oliver, Tracy Stapp, and Detective Ed Cahan was here earlier, along with all of the other people from the Sheriff's Office and FDLE who helped on this case. We appreciate it. And of course, Erin Wolfson, who, as I told you last time, this was her very first homicide call out.
and John Guy, the master, is here. They did a fabulous job. It was a pleasure to work this case with them. I think I told you before that one of the reasons I stepped into it with Erin is I wanted to teach her how to do discovery. Believe it or not, that's one of the first things I told her, and then went with her to the grand jury. So it is very gratifying to come to this day and to finally see closure for all of our victims. We just talked to Tommy Storns, and we're in touch with our other victims' families as well, and we look forward to giving them the final conclusion to this, which will be the sentencing of Michael Dunn. So, yes.
Angela, your reaction to this first-degree murder conviction?
Well, we felt strongly from the beginning of this case that it was first degree. It's why we sought a grand jury indictment. It's why our grand jury did indict Michael Dunn. It seemed so clear-cut to us. But you know, Leslie, when we live with these cases, we don't understand when people don't see them exactly the way we do. But of course, we know everything about the case from A to Z. So we're very pleased that this jury came back with murder in the first degree. We were, you know, gratified for the last verdict because we know that will allow us to seek a sentence. The first 4 counts from the first trial will be, I think it's 105 years, John, with 60 years of minimum mandatories, and now, of course, mandatory life on this count from today.
Do you feel vindicated? You took a lot of criticism of first-degree murder. People said you were overcharging. The jury agreed with you today. Is that a vindication for you as well as a vindication for...
You know, I think it's a vindication for justice. I think that with 32 and a half years of experience combined with John's 20 plus years of experience, the experience of these detectives, we believe that we try hard to file the appropriate charges in every case. We know the elements of the crime that we have to meet, and quite frankly, as I've said before, if we have overcharged, there are remedies for the defense. So in that sense, we believe that it does illustrate that certain factors can come to bear. For example, and I'll be honest, we always thought that on the last jury it was more there was a holdout, not that the jurors didn't agree with first degree at all on Jordan's count. Yes.
Is there a difference in strategy this time that you can credit for maybe the change?
You know, we always learn from our trials. I think a lot of times when we get guilty verdicts, people think we go out and celebrate. One of the things we truly do is we look at everything we did and say, how can we do it better the next time? We send out emails and training little notes to our lawyers, you know, to make sure we all do it better the next time. I think our strategy this time was really just to add a couple of things to the case that we thought were self-evident. And again, that goes back to us believing that the evidence was overwhelming, and it was. We thought that Michael Dunn's flight to avoid prosecution would just be the most striking thing about this case, and hopefully that is what convinced this jury, that if you are defending your life, you don't then run from the scene. You give these officers a chance to do their job fairly.
Could you talk about the importance of retrying this case since Michael Dunn was facing a minimum of 60 years from the prior conviction?
Yes, I think that a lot of people, you know, you mentioned criticism. I'm learning to live with it daily. But I think a lot of people didn't understand why would we try a second case. And the reason for that, Haley, is we have had many cases where we get a conviction and we think we're good, and then years later, sometimes on an appeal, it can come back on something as simple as a jury instruction. I think I might have mentioned to you all last time that we had a lot of second-degree murder and cases reversed because of a manslaughter instruction, something the Supreme Court wrote, nothing to do with any error in the trial. So because cases can be overturned for something we did or didn't do, for something the defense did or didn't do, or just on a technicality or a new jury instruction, we believe that we have to have as much justice as we can to assure that Michael Dunn will never, ever walk out of a prison, because we don't believe he ever needs to be out of prison.
And again, the minimum that he's facing, right?
He's looking at life with a minimum mandatory of 25 to life. So the upper level sentence is life, and the minimum mandatory for using a firearm is 25 years to life. Had he killed Jordan with a bat, he would be looking possibly at life in prison if we had been able to prove premeditation. But the gun minimum mandatory gives the judge 25 years to life. We're going to be asking for life with a life minimum mandatory. Yes.
The audience said that they thought one of the, they hope this served as an example that the makeup, the racial makeup of the jury doesn't matter. And I'm curious if you can have a comment on that, that when we were selecting a jury, did you have any racial profile in mind, and what is the outcome given that this was a predominantly white jury?
You know, we've chosen so many juries that, and it's hard to say that we look for specific jurors. We want jurors who are going to be fair and impartial, jurors who are going to follow the law. That's what we're looking for. And a lot of times, and that's one of the discussions we've had, is we have convicted numerous people of different races, with different makeups on the jury, with different genders on the jury. So what we're hoping for is that it does help send that statement that jurors do their jobs based on law and facts, not based on the color of someone's skin, the gender, or any other outside factor, because this case was always about justice for Jordan in the sense that he was murdered. Make no mistake about it, he was murdered by a grown man who fled the scene. And thank God for Sean Atkins. I have to give Sean Atkins a heads up right now. A young man who was on probation and could easily have gone to jail that night, but who went back to that scene, just like Tommy Storns did, and stayed as long as the police needed them. But Michael Dunn didn't do that. So I think that it speaks a lot to just the facts of the case that this jury found Michael Dunn guilty.
It seemed like you attacked the alibi a lot more in this. Even now you used two guys to a certain extent ridiculed it in the alibi during closing statements. Was that a deliberate decision that we're going to, rather than ignore it the way you seemed to do at times during the first trial, we're just going to attack it and say this is not realistic to believe this?
Do you want to address that? Okay. Again, I think the problem, Larry, is we thought it was so evident that when he fled the scene, you know, flight to avoid prosecution is a strong indicator of guilt. So yes, I believe that we did make a conscious decision to attack what we believed was, quite frankly, a ridiculous story. One of the points being, every time Michael Dunn answered a question, it was, we did this and we did that. And there was only one person who pulled that gun out and shot and killed Jordan Davis, and that was Michael Dunn. So we never were sure who the we was that he was referring to making these decisions. So yes, I do believe we made a conscious decision to go harder after him for what we believe to be an incredulous story.
Can you talk a little bit about this defense team versus the last? Did this defense team put up a better fight?
Both teams put up a good fight for Michael Dunn in light of the facts and the circumstances, and both fought hard for him. So.
Do you feel grateful, or what's your reaction to the fact that a juror was found out, or by whatever means through the article, that he had prejudice against your office? You know,
that's so interesting, because I flat out asked the jurors, and I'm not sure if y'all, I think some of you were in there when I said, look, a lot gets said about me and about my office. You won't hurt my feelings. Tell me now if you have an issue with it. We ask that in every case, by the way. That's not just a question we ask in high-profile cases. So the problem wasn't whether the juror did have a problem with me specifically, and I don't know if you've seen the transcript. I think some of you were looking at it. He ended up apologizing. He said he was joking. He said he meant no disrespect. We believe that. It was probably just an artful joke that I feel like his fellow juror took advantage of, to be honest with you. But we couldn't take that chance. And one of the things I explained to him is, if I was at a civic gathering making a speech and somebody told somebody else they didn't like me, that is absolutely their right. But when I'm in my capacity, not as a state attorney, but as a trial lawyer, representing the people of the state of Florida, working with the trial team to prosecute the case, we have to make sure everybody can be fair and impartial. And so we wouldn't have minded if he had flat out said that. You might remember there was one young man who stood up and said he didn't like the police and he didn't like us, and they were going to put his sister-in-law in jail for charges he thought were, I think he said they were chump charges, and he might have to take care of the kids. He went on and on. I was very appreciative to know that that juror did have some feelings about law enforcement of the prosecution office. So yes, we were grateful to find out about it, but I hope that that juror doesn't suffer embarrassment because of it, because I think he's already, apologized, said what he had to say, and we moved on from it.
Ms. Corey, could you explain the sentencing that again, I didn't...
Yes, from the first trial, he's looking at a potential of 105 total years. That's on every count. That would be if the judge ran them consecutive. Again, that's the sentence for the charge itself. On 3 of the counts, for Tommy, Leland, and Tevin, he's facing a 20-year minimum mandatory for discharging the firearm but not striking any of the three of them. So it would be whatever number of years up to 105 with a 60-year minimum mandatory. That is not negotiable. That is mandatory. The judge will have to impose it, and by law it does have to run consecutive. And then on first-degree murder, he's looking at, as I said, life with a 25 to life minimum mandatory. The judge can give anywhere from 25 up to life as the minimum mandatory. It's not set like 10 or 20. He could give a 37-year minimum mandatory, for example. I think a lot of people are confused because they think it's 10, 25, and then just life, or just 25, but it's anywhere in between.
So we can say 25 to life?
25, no. He's looking at a mandatory life sentence on first-degree murder. It's the minimum mandatory that throws everything off. That runs with...
Without parole?
Yes, no parole. Mandatory life.
So the minimum he gets is life plus 60 years. That's the absolute lowest sentence he can get.
He could get, yes, that's the absolute lowest. That's correct. Yes. You're better at math than I am, because yes, because it took me a second. And minimum mandatories are difficult to understand because they run on a different track, so to speak. The upper level of the charge, the actual sentence, can be one thing, and then the minimum mandatory is a different sentence, but it runs with that other sentence. Any other questions? Anything for Sergeant Paul or his team or Detective Musser? I will tell you, it is difficult to sit in a courtroom and watch our officers get attacked the way that they were attacked in this case. They did an outstanding job. They worked through the night, as they do on many occasions, and got Michael Dunn within 18 hours. They had him in custody, and it's very difficult. It was also a little difficult to hear the defense attack these young men and call them liars. That was difficult, but we've all done enough trials to know that sometimes that's their tactic. We're gratified to see that the jury did not fall prey to that. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. God had some sharp points for Michael Knox, who has done some work for your office. Will he do additional work in the future?
You know, I think it would be difficult to hire Mr. Knox now that he's done so much work for the defense. And what we want from our experts when we do have to hire someone, you know, primarily we're allowed to rely on our own evidence technicians and Florida Department of Law Enforcement. But when someone makes the kind of basic mistakes where they say in their report one thing and then give a different opinion on the stand, it's something we'll have to evaluate.
Since it has come up a lot over the last 2 years, can you guys please explain why there were 4 days before a search for a weapon?
No? You want me to explain? I'm happy to. Because there wasn't a weapon. There was never a weapon. Not a single credible witness ever said there was a weapon, or you better believe they'd be out there searching, digging that place up. They could have dug up every square inch of that corner of Bay Meadows and Southside Boulevard, and there wasn't anything that remotely resembled a weapon. They wouldn't have found it. It wasn't there. Anything else? Thank you all so much, and take care.